everyone, welcome to my channel. My name's Nicole. Today's a very exciting day for me because it's actually my first ever YouTube video. I figured what better way to start my channel than with my very own birth story. So I'm a first-time mom. I actually just gave birth to my son a little over 2 months ago, and I ended up having to be medically induced due to high blood pressure. So my pregnancy was relatively normal. Around 37 weeks pregnant, I had gone to my weekly appointment to check on baby, make sure everything was going smooth, and my blood pressure was actually normal at this appointment. I ended up having some symptoms like throughout the week where I just felt like I had a headache, like things just felt off. So I actually had an at-home blood pressure cuff, and I decided to take my blood pressure at home just to see if anything was like acting up. My blood pressure was actually elevated, and it was 140/82, which was relatively high for me considering my blood pressure usually rides on like 120/70. I decided to call my doctor's office and ask them if I can come in so they can take it in the office, because I figured maybe my blood pressure cuff was off or just something was, going awry with me at home. So they told me to come in. I had gone in, they took my blood pressure, it was the same. They told me to monitor my blood pressure at home once a day for the next few days until my next appointment. Monday rolls around and they take my blood pressure in the office, and once again it was still 140/80, and so they decided that they were diagnosing me with gestational hypertension, which is high blood pressure during pregnancy, because of the multiple occasions where we were getting high readings. At this point, I was 38 weeks pregnant, so they actually scheduled induction for that Sunday, which put me at a little bit before 39 weeks. So I did feel comfortable with being induced because I knew that at that point it needed to be done. And the doctors reassured me that this was something that happens in the end of pregnancies, like it was normal. So I trusted my doctors and I felt very comfortable with the decision that we made together. They had checked me when I was in the office that day. My cervix was high and closed, which means I had no progress whatsoever, which was kind of a bummer. But as a first-time mom, they assured me that this was normal, and a lot of times first-time moms go later than their due date, so it wasn't uncommon that my cervix wasn't ready at that time. They just needed to know that so that they knew what medicine to proceed with, so that when I got admitted for induction, they knew where to start. Me being a control freak, it definitely was nice that I had a date versus waiting and just wondering when I'm gonna sporadically go into labor. But it also gave me a sense of anxiety because I knew that it was coming. But obviously I was excited. So Sunday rolls around and we got a phone call from the hospital around 5 p.m. They told me to come in around 7:30 p.m. I go to be admitted. My husband and I go inside. We bring our bags because this is during the time of COVID. So we kind of packed a lot of extra stuff just in case, because we weren't sure if he would be able to leave or at what point. So we just packed everything we could potentially need just in case we needed it while we were in the hospital. We get checked in. They bring me to the high-risk floor so that they can monitor me, considering I had a medical induction. They get me hooked up to the monitors so that they can track baby's heartbeat, they can get my blood pressure on the screen and just make sure everything is looking good. So when they hooked me up to the monitors, they actually noticed that I was having slight contractions already. I wasn't feeling anything at all, but they were showing on the screen, and I was shocked because I was like, wow, a few days ago I wasn't even dilated, and now all of a sudden I'm having contractions. So my midwife had come in and we had talked about what they were going to do. So since my cervix was closed and high and not soft at all, they were going the route of using Cervidil. Cervidil almost looks like a little shoestring with medication on the end, and they basically insert it into the cervix and they leave it there for 12 hours so that it can help soften the cervix so that you can start to progress in the process. This was around 9 p.m. when they inserted the Cervidil, and then they were like, just try to get some sleep because this is probably going to be the only time that you can get some good rest. But at 39 weeks pregnant, honestly, how good of rest am I getting with a big old belly? They inserted it and it was slightly uncomfortable because my cervix just wasn't ready, and it just, being super pregnant, it just wasn't a comfortable thing, but it was within a couple of seconds and I barely even knew that it was there. After that, I was able to eat and I just was kind of laying in bed watching TV, like we were getting ourselves adjusted. So I go to sleep. wake up the next morning, and around 9 a.m. they come in to remove the Cervidil and basically are figuring out what next steps are. At this point, I was soft, but I was still high, so there still was some progress that needed to be made before we were ready for the labor and delivery unit. So at this point, my doctor said, you know, we'll take you off the monitors so that you can walk around the room a little bit, kind of get off the monitors and stretch, and we'll decide what next steps were. My contractions were, you know, showing on the screen as becoming more progressive, but I wasn't feeling all that much. I was feeling slight cramping, but nothing crazy. So I, you know, didn't really think much into it. It was about 1 to 2 centimeters dilated. It wasn't anything groundbreaking, but more progress considering on Tuesday's appointment, I was 0. So I was walking around the room trying to just stretch my legs, and I just kept feeling this cramping in my back, in my stomach. Like, it was just very uncomfortable. It kind of felt like I had to go to the bathroom. So I go to get back in the bed because the nurse had come in so she could hook me back up to the monitors, and I'm just sitting there, you know, waiting. And all of a sudden I felt just this warm liquid, and it just, and right away immediately I thought to myself, like, I cannot have to go to the bathroom like I just did. And so my husband looks at me and he's like, did your water break? And I was like, I don't know. And so as I'm sitting there, I'm just feeling this liquid, and I'm like, oh my God, I think my water did break. At this point, it's about 10 a.m. My doctor comes in, and she was so happy because she was like, you know, that's the best part, that your water broke on its own. We didn't have to do that for you. And she said, honestly, I was going to tell you that there wasn't another step we could do yet because your contractions were getting progressively closer together. Then at that point, they brought me to labor and delivery, and they hooked me up on Pitocin because they wanted to make sure that my contractions stayed in a steady pattern to keep me progressing. They were afraid that if they didn't hook me up to the Pitocin, that my contractions would kind of just fall flat naturally, so they wanted to make sure that things kept moving. They did actually start coming on pretty fast and pretty strong. I think at one point I felt pretty much just little cramping that I was able to just kind of work through, to all of a sudden it hit a point where I couldn't even really sit still. I was kind of having trouble talking, and I was like, okay, I'm ready for my epidural. I kind of didn't want it because I was only about 3 to 4 centimeters dilated at this point, and I was nervous that I was like, well, if I get my epidural now, I'm, you know, am I gonna not progress further? Is it gonna wear off? Like, there was a lot of things that I was questioning, and my nurse was like, you'll have a button, it's not gonna wear off, and we can make sure that you're going to keep progressing with different positions, that we can put you in the bed. So I felt comfortable getting the epidural because she said, you're only going to be torturing yourself if you decide to wait. Within about 45 minutes, I think, the anesthesiologist was in my room to get me set up with my epidural. And that I was a little bit nervous about because, you know, needles in the spine kind of freak you out, but I was ready because at that point I was feeling pretty painful contractions that it kind of outweighed the fact that I was gonna get a needle in my back. So they sit me up on the bed, and my feet were kind of hanging off the side with the nurse in front of me, and the anesthesiologist walked me through the steps, and they administered the epidural. And it was a slight uncomfortable, like, stinging that I felt, but it definitely wasn't to the point that I couldn't bear the pain or anything like that. It was very quick too. So once I had my epidural, the nurse had decided to put me on my side with the peanut ball in between my legs to help me progress further along. But the thing that had happened is when I was laying on my side for such a long period of time, that the gravity of the way the epidural is administered kind of started to wear off on a certain part of my side, that I actually started feeling contractions on just one section of my side, and the rest of me was numb. So we flopped me back to my back and sat me up for a little bit so that gravity was able to take action and numb the rest of me again. So I had taken a few naps in between because I was actually comfortable enough with the epidural that I was able to sleep a little bit and just let my body kind of just relax. So around 9:30, the doctor had come in and he checked my cervix to see how I was doing. And at this point, I was ready to push. I was 10 centimeters, fully effaced, ready to go. And so he actually was going to step out to just see a patient down the hall really quick and have the nurse get set up with everything. And he'd be right back and we would get going. So the doctor had come back in and he looked at me and he was like, how are you feeling? And, you know, honestly, at that point, I felt nothing. My epidural was so good that I did not feel anything at all. And my doctor's face was pretty shocked because he said, how far down the baby's head was that I should have been feeling a pretty intense pressure at that point, but I really did not feel anything. And I'm very grateful for that. The nurse had asked me if I could feel any of the contractions, because the whole point of pushing is to push on a contraction, and I didn't feel contractions. So they had to monitor them on the screen and tell me when to push so that I was able to push productively. Each time they would tell me, you know, push now, and I would hold it for about 10 seconds and then breathe out. From when I started pushing to when he came out, it was 12 minutes. And I was mind blown. Everyone was telling me after that, all the nurses, my doctor, he said for first time moms, the typical average of pushing is about 3 hours. And I was just shocked that I actually was able to push through that quickly. He was a healthy baby. He was 7 pounds, 5 ounces. I did have a 2nd-degree tear that needed to be stitched up. Baby came out and he was on my chest. We were doing skin to skin, and he actually asked my husband if he wanted to cut the cord, but my husband was a little bit queasy and he was like, no, I'm not gonna do it. And then he asked me if I wanted to. And at first I kind of hesitated because I was like, no, you know, but I actually decided to do it. And so it was kind of an empowering moment to have my son on my chest and to be able to cut the cord. I was very excited, and I think I actually said to the doctors after he was born that I said, wow, this experience was a lot better than I could have imagined. It almost sounded like I was giving like a Yelp review on, you know, a vacation. So after the baby was born, we were wheeled to the mother baby unit, and that's where we stayed for the remainder of our hospital stay. They actually had a little sandwich kit in my room when I got there, which I was ecstatic about because my entire pregnancy, all I wanted was a turkey sandwich. My doctor advised to not have any deli meat while I was pregnant unless I heated it up, and that was just something I did not want to be having. So we didn't get to sleep much because everybody was coming in periodically just to check the baby, check my blood pressure. Definitely made for a crazy first 24 hours because there was just constant people in the room, and like I was almost on this high after having him, that it was just this like surreal moment that everything just kind of becomes a blur. I could see why people say when it comes time to having another baby that you forget all about the pain that you endured, because honestly, after having him, I couldn't remember any of the things I had complained about prior. I was happy that we did pack extra things because my husband was not able to leave the room due to COVID, but I will say that I definitely packed a lot more than I needed, that I could put in another video to talk about hospital bag essentials, because I had a giant rolling suitcase that I think I only touched a quarter of it, and there was just so many unnecessary items that I just brought to have. You can bring whatever makes you feel comfortable, and that's kind of the approach I took. I just wanted to have anything that I could potentially think of needing so that if I wanted it, I had it. As a first-time mom, you don't really know what the experience will be, so you don't know what you're gonna want versus what you're gonna need. And so I felt comfortable having it all, but now looking back at it, I could definitely do some paring down when it comes time to having a second baby. From the point of when my water broke to when he was born, it was 24 hours. So I am really grateful for that as well. It was just more or less my body kind of took its own course once the medication kind of gave it that little extra boost. Medical inductions just vary. It depends on each woman and how their body is progressing with medications. So this was just what happened with me. I do remember doing some research when I found out I had to be induced, and I just felt like there was so many more horror stories related to inductions. For example, everything was super painful, or it was a really long time, or the doctors, or something was just horrible, and it made me as a first-time mom be extremely nervous. And so I wanted to put this out there so that people can see that not every medical induction is scary. Obviously, everything has its point of being scary when it's new, but there's positives to being induced even when it's not, you know, the plan from the beginning. Like, I never would have anticipated this would have been the route that my pregnancy took at the end, but I'm happy that I'm healthy, baby's healthy. That's all I could have ever asked for. So that is my birth story. I hope you all enjoyed. I hope this video helps another mama out there. If you're scared, if you're nervous as a first-time mom, or even a second time, third time, whatever, if you found out that you have to be medically induced and you're starting to freak out, I hope that this information kind of gave you a little light at the end of the tunnel. I'll be posting more content related to motherhood and all its journeys as a first-time mom. So if you're interested, please like and subscribe, and hope to see you again soon. Bye.